Welcome back to Murali End. My name's Dominic Machado. I am in London and I'm joined by my cousin, the Professor of Cricketology in the United States, Dominic Machado. We are answering your questions after Sri Lanka's emphatic 2-0 series win against New Zealand at Gaul. Sri Lanka are now currently in third place in the race to get to that London game that we don't mention on this show, or at least I don't mention. I noticed when I was off last week. Dom and Estelle were quite happily just banding about the words, where I believe in all sorts of sporting jinxes, so therefore will not mention it. Anyway, the Murali End is brought to you by Mike Ward Mortgages. If you need a mortgage in Saudi Arabia, if you need a mortgage in the UAE, or if you need a mortgage in England, then get in touch with Mike Ward. All the details are in the description. If you mention Murali End, you'll probably get a favourable treatment. I don't know if that's true or not. He might offer some mutton rolls, who knows? And also, actually, he might not, because you're probably going to talk to him virtually, and it might not even be him. It might be one of the people who work there. Who knows? Anyway, get in touch with them. If you would like to help support this show, this podcast, this YouTube channel, then you can hit the subscribe button. You can hit the follow. You can leave us a comment. You can leave us a like. If we say something you don't like, tell us about it down below. It's fine. I was very lucky to be born ugly, so I'm used to negative comments. It's cool. Dominic is a beautiful human. He's not so used to it, so be a bit more fragile if it's anything he says. Or handle with care. We are answering your questions after the series. Some of you emailed me your questions, which is great. You got my email address by being in the WhatsApp channel. When you're in the WhatsApp channel, I can't see your number. We can't... you can't see my number. I just put, or not just me, we all do for the Murali End. We put stuff in there. Estelle's in the UAE right now covering the Women's World Cup. Sri Lanka could do something quite special. They probably won't. It's unlikely according to the bookies. Not that I gamble, but I should kind of let you know that. But she'll be putting in exclusive content from Sri Lanka's World Cup campaign in that group. So do subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and also subscribe to the Substack as well, the newsletter, muraliend.substack.com. I forgot it when we were recorded the other one, but I remember it now. Nick Brooks has written a piece about Community Mendes that you will not want to miss out on, and you will no doubt share with your friends and family as well. Dom, let's get stuck into the questions. We'll do the email questions first. Nilan Navaratnam emailed. He said, thoughts on Madushanka having a bit of a quiet series and what he needs, e.g. technical tweaks and mental things going forward for the series in South Africa. Yeah, Patton was probably the only batter. He'd stolen all the headlines at the end of the England series. Didn't get any headlines during the Kiwi series.
Yeah, this is a good question. So I've had this question from my mother repeatedly. My mom has been following closely and was super excited by Madushanka's excellence in England, and he had a bit of a rough series. I think as opener, you're always going to be vulnerable early in the innings as the ball is moving around. It's hard to bat at the opening of the innings, even if the pitch is flat, right? We saw Sri Lanka pile on 602, but Patham only got one of those. So it's always going to be a tough thing. I think what we saw in England, and this will be my sort of reassurance, is that he's got the technique to do well anywhere. He knows when to play. He knows when to leave. He is very aggressive. He knows how to score runs. And I think the first match, it was more an issue of his aggression. He was kind of told to go out there and be aggressive, and he did that. And I'm not worried. I think he'll know that runs may be a little bit more of a premium in South Africa, and he'll tighten up his technique. Everything we saw in England looked good. He knows how to stay side on. He can drive the ball even on the up in difficult conditions. So he just is going to need more reps and more play, and I anticipate him doing excellently well in the future.
Yeah, I was thinking about kind of technical mental things. I think his strength is his mental strength, right? And Sri Lanka have actually, the way it's panned out for him, it's kind of, you know, he's got the technique to score runs in every format,
Yeah.
I think, and they've kind of worked on or he's worked on, somehow it's come together, the kind of mental side of the game. I think the only thing he's got to kind of keep working on is keep believing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be quite difficult from the distance that we watch the game from sometimes to figure out if there's any technical issues. Um, so, and you know, sometimes you get unlucky, right? He would have been in
Yeah.
that pavilion thinking, I'm going to come out the next innings and smash 150 in
Yep.
150 balls, and obviously he didn't need to do that. And if he had
Yep.
done that, it would totally have changed the game, right? I spent 4 innings waiting for him to show up in England, and then he did eventually that fourth innings. I mean, if he ends up being a player that just scores runs away from home in fourth innings, then I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that.
That's fine.
Like
That's fine. I'm
that,
good with that. Yep.
yeah, that's all right. But I also think with Patum and also with Kamindu, there's a couple of other players in the white ball team. As I think actually, when you compare them where their careers are at in terms of how they're scoring runs and when they're scoring runs and what roles they're asked to play in the team, it's actually much further along the line than some of our greats have been in the past. When you, oh, go on, Dom.
No, I was going to say I'm 100% on board with that. I think the mental adjustments that both of them have made to the international game has been absolutely outstanding, and in fact, completely unexpected. For like usually, we've talked about this before. It takes years for Sri Lankan batters to get the sense of international cricket, and these guys have taken like ducks to water and improved their game by leaps and bounds. So like I 100% agree that this is irregular how good they've been this early in their career.
Yeah, the other thing that I think potentially Patter might be experiencing now, or if he hasn't, he will do shortly, is that he's basically played all around the world now. So now he's going around, in some cases, a second or third time. So almost every team he's faced against has seen him. So there's quite a lot of data about how to bowl to him and what his weak areas might be and where you might get him out at which phases in the game as well. So he's got to be careful about that. He's got to keep adapting and keep working with that in mind. Kamindu,
And
he's obviously not that far down the road in his international career, particularly in Red Bull. So there's a different data set available to people to look at. I think Chaitha Lanka is another player who's in the same place as Patton was at in terms of he's been round, and this is obviously a different format we're talking about, but he's been round the world once already, if not twice. So people are starting to build up a bit of a profile about where you should and shouldn't bowl to these guys, which is why he needs to kind of stay ahead of it. I mean, these guys know all this stuff, right? When you, if you talk to them, if you're around coaching cricket teams, this is what the coaches are talking about. They know it's at the top level, which these guys are at. It can become a game of chess, right? If you watch the test, they talk about that a bit, right? Usman Khawaja's trajectory and stuff. Like it's interesting stuff. I mean, I'm not worried at all about Patam Sanka not making big runs.
Not at all.
In fact, he didn't make runs, but the rest of the team did. I think should only relax him and kind of, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's a driven bloke. He doesn't need it anyway, but kind of fire him up a little bit more, I'd imagine as well. Daraka has emailed in 2 questions. What will be the squad for the South Africa tour? We'll get to that in a minute because I think the first question he asked is a bit more interesting. What are your thoughts on adding Dilshan Madushanka to the test squad? He's a bowler who has that X factor, especially would be beneficial when we are travelling outside of Asia. I think it is 1,000,000% a great idea. I think there's 2 things that we need to consider though. Can he bowl a long spell in Test cricket? He's been fairly injury prone. And secondly, so part of that consideration is what happens when he breaks down, if he breaks down during a Test match. And secondly, what is this going to be a long-term thing? Obviously, I live in England and I've lived through the whole Jofra Archer situation where he kind of was breathing fire in Australia against Australia a few years ago and basically hasn't bowled a red ball since because of injuries. that I think are probably directly related to the long spells he bowled during that. If Sri Lanka think that he could be fit enough to do it, and he could, um, they can on field manage him for it, then I am kind of open to it. But I do think there's you've got to consider the player's long term future, right? Is one test match
Yeah.
if we go right, there is a clear path to this London game. If we can win the next 4 test matches, then we can get ourselves to Lords. If they go, let's drop him in there, and let's do this, and this is how we're going to do it. The question I would have if I was Dilshan Madushanka or in his camp is, what is the plan? Like, what is my fitness plan for getting through these 4 games when you're going to expect me to bowl kind of, let's say, 40 overs over 5 days, 4 times, and not lose time at the back end of my career, or not lose another 6 months, or miss out on various franchise contracts, because I don't think he hasn't played cricket in quite a while at the moment. I don't know what his current fitness state is, but that man is a diamond, and we need to do everything we can to protect him.
Yeah.
And he's fully formed. No
100%.
more pressure is going to make him any better, right? Like, this is it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're 100% right that, like, he is injury prone, and throwing 40 overs onto him when we already have a pretty good seam bowling attack. Sure, would it be nice if he could have like a Jasper Bumrah type impact? Yeah, it would be great. But one, we haven't seen him play in tests. We saw him play one, and he wasn't very good in it. So we don't know that he can have that kind of impact in test cricket. We don't know that his style, that he even wants to do that. Is he a great prospect? Could he be a very good test cricketer? I have no doubt, right? But I think there's no need to risk him at the moment when we know he's already a stellar white ball cricketer, and where he hasn't really shown us that he wants to play test cricket, or B, is going to be like a huge X factor in terms of coming in. We can imagine it, but not worth the risk.
I also think that there seems to be a plan. You can see this with, I think Milan Ratnaik is the kind of prototype of the kind of shrunken bowling laboratory, where they are trying to breed a type of fast bowler specifically for the red ball game. And I also wonder if dropping players in, like parachuting players in, because you think there's, we think Dilshan Madushanka could come in and get wickets, get key batters out, and get us over the line towards London, might actually be kind of disruptive for the squad. I mean, there'll be some people, we say that, go, well, about the way it's treating Ramesh Mendes. I think that's a slightly different scenario, because they're not. If they'd brought in Hasaranga or Teachner to replace him, I think maybe that might have caused some issues.
That's a different issue,
caused a different issue. But I wonder for the cohesion of the unit, if actually there is now a kind of I'm kind of suggesting there is a pipeline to red ball cricket for the national side, and maybe they don't want to kind of blow it all up. But who knows, right? If it comes down to that one game against Australia, and it's like, right, who can?
But that's going to be at home, though.
Yeah, and So we're thinking 2 tests at Gaul, right? That's what we're hoping for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or somewhere where it's not. I mean, I think that's what they're probably going to do. So I think they have it enough. Yeah.
You'd hope that would.
But I think it's not worth it, right? He has so much talent. He's had so many injuries. He can, his career can really take off if we protect him. And for me, that's the first thing that we got to do, is make sure that he can have that career as a white ball player before anything else.
Should we answer some more questions?
Yeah,
Oh,
let's do it.
sorry. No, the second part of that question was, what's the squad going to be for South Africa? I think really the question is there
Oh,
is who's going to be the spare batters? Because I think the batting lineup looks set now. And what is the
yeah,
makeup of spinners and seamers going to be? Um,
yeah,
I'd imagine the squad would be quite similar to the squad that
yeah.
went to England,
England, right? Yeah.
except I imagine
Maybe with
Ashada.
Oshada in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I
And
mean,
yeah,
he's been brought into the squad. He didn't do anything, so you can't. How are you going to drop him? But then sometimes Sri Lankan
yeah,
cricket works differently to
yeah.
right. Um,
I think I think the two things I'll point out would be I wouldn't be surprised if Isitha Wijasundara gets brought in instead of someone like Nasala Tharaka, who didn't play. Also, Eshan Malinga was very good in the South Africa series too. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in maybe as well instead of maybe Kasim Rajatha. But because Rajatha didn't play, that England series, even though we rotated our seamers. So those two would be the players who I'd imagine would potentially come in as paceys. And for spin, I'd imagine Purist is going to travel as the second spinner from now on instead of Ramesh Mendes. That would be my other guess. And then, as you said, Oshada probably stay in, and Oshada and Sadira will be there to spare batters, I'd imagine.
and do you think then they still take Van der Sar, or do you think they might take another pacer?
That's a good question. It's unclear what their hope is with Van der Sar. I guess it also depends. I haven't looked at where they're going to be playing in South Africa because there are a couple of pitches that do take some turn, so maybe there'll be some hope. But um, the fact that they didn't play McGall as a third spinner or anything like that, I think maybe it's just a pat on the back for, hey, you performed really well against India. Why don't you, sort of come with us to England and enjoy this tour? Speaking of which, you did a great interview with him that will
I did,
release
yeah.
at some point, right?
We'll release it when there's a lull in Sri Lankan cricket content. But yeah, we go in depth
Which is not now.
about which is not now because that World Cup is what, days away. We are hours away from Sri Lanka's first game against Pakistan. And as I mentioned earlier, Estella's there, so do hit that follow button, do hit the subscribe, and tell all your friends about us. Yeah, we'll release that probably between the New Zealand series, sorry, the West India series and the New Zealand series. I think there's a small break for a few days. So my plan was to put it out then. We talk about that India. We talk about that match, that game.
Yeah. And sorry to out you there, Mark.
That's all right. That's all right. We're friends, me and Vanders. We what's that? He supports Man United though, which is a bit of a shame for me. But there you go.
And as some other supporting issues that we won't go into here.
Gomasena has asked, did the O'Rourke selection of the first test catch the Gaul creators by surprise? Was an effort to flatten the pitch at his length for the second test where he went wicketless? This is an absolute knockout question as well. I think there's three things about that selection. I think Sri Lanka were more caught out, as in the team were more caught out about it than anyone else. They just weren't expecting it, and it looked to me like they possibly hadn't done as much homework about him and what he might do as they should have done. So I was thinking about this in between the tests because obviously the turnaround was pretty quick. I don't know how much work they would have been able to do on that pitch to make it more or less favourable, or whether basically you just maintain it and it kind of naturally, I want to say disintegrates, but what I actually mean to say is gets better for spinning in it.
Yes.
Because effectively you're playing cricket on it, or if they last if the matches last all 5 days, you're hoping to play cricket on it because they practice, or they go. No, they won't. They won't practice on that pitch. They practice on the pitch. 15, 10 days out of 15, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm yeah, I think to a degree the Gaul gradsmen and gradswomen were caught on the hop with it. I'm it, preparing cricket grounds is a really interesting thing,
Yeah.
and like generally, if I could, I'd retire, and that would like be my full time job. I'd love it being a groundsman. When I used to play rugby, I used to
The
chat to the
grounds
groundsman.
uncle.
Yeah, I'd be a grounds uncle. I used to chat to the groundsman who was while I played rugby. There was cricket pitches on it on the same bit as well, so you'd have to look after that quite a lot about how they do it because I think it's quite a science behind it.
Mm.
I really don't because the other X factor about that first test was that rest day, and there was some concern about what the pitch might do
Yeah.
during that rest day. If you remember that, obviously it still kept doing everything
Yeah.
Sri Lanka needed it to do. But I think the O'Rourke not picking up wickets in the second test, I think it's twofold. Firstly, Sri Lanka had a look at him the first time round. Our
Yeah.
batters are quite experienced, so it's a bit of a fool me once
Yeah.
kind of scenario. I also think New Zealand, as good as Sri Lanka were absolutely terrible for large parts of that
Yeah.
innings. Like I've
Yeah.
rarely
They're very
you rarely
poor.
see it
Yeah.
and a kind of established test team be that poor. And I
Yep.
don't think
And
he
New
was getting the
Zealand
help.
especially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't getting the help from the rest of the team
Um,
that they should have. Sorry, go on, Dom.
yeah. I'm no. I was just gonna say I think like eh, I'm not surprised because fast bowlers do tend really good fast bowlers do tend to produce in Sri Lanka. I remember when we won that 2016 Test series against Australia, Mitchell Starc was brilliant. Um, Wasim and Makar both prospered. Dale Steyn, Jimmy Anderson. There is something for very good fast bowlers. If you can get reverse swing, if you can get the ball to move early, um, if you can get the ball to bounce, all those things are good. So, and Will O'Rourke is, he's a tremendous prospect. He's tall, he bowls fast. He was at the batters, and I think hats off to him for bowling well and doing it. And sometimes that's what happens. Even in Bangladesh, which is perhaps more spin friendly than Sri Lanka, we saw Asitha take 10, right? I think he and Rajatha took like 14 or 15 wickets that match, which again never happens in the subcontinent. So I think it's less of a issue with the pitch and more just sometimes a player like O'Rourke is very skilled and players need time to adjust to it, and when they do, they'll play better. And he didn't get any support from his catchers in that second test match, so things might have looked a little bit different had he done so.
I can't believe you mentioned their name. I cannot believe you said it. Disgusting. Though it is where I will be waking up early tomorrow to watch the conclusion of their test against India because India did some extraordinary things today, rewriting
I think
the
the timed
history.
out dismissal might not be out of the question in that match.
Just in case you're an India fan or interested in Indian cricket, I should also tell you we do have a brother podcast called Kumbale Corner. It's on the same channel on YouTube, or it's on a separate channel on podcast platforms. Kumbale Corner 2Ks because we like alliteration and we also like spinners. That's what we do here at the Murali End. Second question's come in. It's not us, by the way. We only talk about Sri Lanka. There's a whole different cast of people in it. If you haven't heard Karan, who's lives and raised in Texas, but is a rabid India fan, talk about cricket, then I really recommend you do because it is quite something. Even if you have no interest in Indian cricket, then you should definitely give him a go because it's worth watching. Ara has asked the second seamer question in Sri Lanka: is their role Ratnayaka non-existent in the second test? It's a good question. I'll let you answer this first, Dom, and I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah,
we talked about this a bit in the previous
yeah.
podcast.
I think it's an issue of basically wanting a batting all rounder, more or less. I think they were a little worried after some of the collapses that occurred with the batters 8 through 11. So I think they wanted to bring in some more batting support. They brought in Lahiri on the back of a very good series in England, thinking that he might provide a little bit of oomph to the bowling lineup, but they didn't really use him very much. And I think they brought in Milan to say basically, okay, can you extend the batting a little bit? Turned out they didn't need to extend the batting at all for this match. I think that role of who is going to be the number 8 is a big question. And I think it ties into something. So if you want to get our thoughts on that, go back and click on the last video there and check out our discussion of the test, because one of the things we talked about is bowling plans. If there's something that the team needs to improve upon, is how are we going to attack the other side? So I don't really have an issue with playing two seamers. New Zealand did that in the first test and did that quite effectively. But the issue for me is you have to have a plan for how you're going to use them. Where you're going to deploy them, who's going to play what role, whether it's getting reverse swing, whether it's trying a bouncer tactic against somebody, whether it's bowling up front with the new ball. I think that's, to me, the issue. It's less about can two seamers play in Sri Lanka? Of course they can. It's just you have to pick the right players for your bowling strategy and think about how you're going to use them. Do you want to just have 3 over spells where you can have someone let loose? We saw someone like Ben Stokes do a really good job of that when they played in Sri Lanka. He didn't bowl too much, but when he came on, he was very, very impactful because he was there and he was ready to, he had a role to play. So I don't have a problem with playing a second seamer as much as if you're going to do it, have a plan for how you're going to use them. Don't just say, okay, you bowled 7 overs today. That's fine. Try to get them into the game, try to get them to be useful, and try to have plans for how they're going to take wickets.
I also think the Sri Lanka basically had 4 spinners on the pitch, right? So DDS is at home, he's a full all-rounder, right? And Kamindu's not a great spinner of the ball, but if you needed to, you can get a few overs out of him. I know when it got really extreme at the Oval, a test that Sri Lanka obviously went on to win, Angelo ended up bowling again. But I suppose the real question is do they play another spinner? But I mean, do you need to have 5 spinners? I mean, I say this, Sri Lanka have played with 5 spinners in the past, so or five slow arm bowlers in the past, right? So maybe you put an extra batter in. And you just go, it's fine. We don't need it.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think it's about how they want to deploy their resources, and I think who they feel good about as a third spinner, if there is one, right? Like, so do they think Van der Sar can do the job, right? Like, if they really thought, hey, like this guy can come in and provide something different and attack the other side, then go for it. But I think it's more about how they plan. Like, it's their attack and they need to plan out how they're going to get those 20 wickets and who gives them the best chance for
it. Next question. Pavara has asked, what would be criteria for picking second spin in upcoming series like Australia and above? This is kind of a similar question, I suppose. Yeah. I think really this question is about Ramesh Mendis, isn't it? And we'll kind of be putting off the conversation about the fact that he's been dropped. A little bit. I will be honest with you, Dom. I find the way he was dropped a little bit awkward. Because I think when you were that second or third spinner, we talked about Jeffrey Van der Sar basically just being part of the squad, going around and just doing a lot of gym work and the odd bit of fielding. I mean, that's a tough role to have on your like mental health, I suppose, right? Because what sometimes we forget as fans is that all these guys on their ascent to the national team and into the squads and all that have basically the best player around, right? I know it's kind of maybe potentially slightly different around red ball cricket in Sri Lanka with slow arm bowlers, but I mean, they've been really good at cricket, and then suddenly you're at a stage where you sit on the bench, and then suddenly you get a shot,
Yeah.
and you're not quite able to do what they want you to do, and then you get dropped. And I think this one worked out. It was a bold decision. It was good, but the fact that the captains in a press conference kind of slagging you off is probably
Mm.
possibly not the
Called you
best
out,
look.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah. I think Yeah, I think this is tricky because Ramesh Mendes has been playing this role for a while and he's underperformed, and I think it's fair to drop him. I also think that bowling spin in Sri Lanka is harder than people think it is. People think, oh, you're a spinner, you should just be able to prosper. Um, what made Murali so good was not that he could turn the ball miles. It was that he could land it on a spot every time, wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, right? And that's what Ramesh Mendes lacks, is that ability to land it on a spot, because he can get turned, right? And that might actually be more valuable in places like South Africa or in England, where you're looking for someone to generate deviation off the pitch. In Sri Lanka, you don't need that because the pitch generates deviation for you. That's why the straighter one is always the more dangerous ball, because that's the one that does something different, right? When the ball is turning a lot, it's most likely going to miss the bat. It's going to miss the stumps, all that stuff. You have to land it perfectly to get it in play, right? But and that's what I think Nishan Pires did so well, is he was bowling. He bowls. He doesn't bowl over. He bowls front on, right? So he was bowling. His action looks like Mahesh Theekshan's action, as a point of comparison. And so he was bowling that stump to stump line, and basically saying, okay, you've got to play, right? And if you're playing, then you're in the game. You're bringing your close catchers in, you're bringing your LBWs in, you're bringing your bolds in. So that's where I think, like, the second spinner question is, it depends where they're playing. In a place like Sri Lanka, you want someone who's accurate and can be at the stumps all day, because it gives you the chance to take wickets. And that's what I think you look for with someone like Nishan Pires. And yes, if you can turn the ball a mile, that's great. But that doesn't necessarily automatically make you good for Sri Lankan conditions. And that's where Ramesh Mendes has kind of suffered, is he has this ability, but it's kind of neutered by the fact that we're playing on spin-friendly pitches.
That was quite a comprehensive answer. The other thing I will say, right, just to add to this, is that for so long, Sri Lanka had effectively the best spinner around. Like, we had Murali, and then when he retires, we have Herath. So, I mean, Prabhath is incredible, like, as a bowler, and compared to his peers around the world. But there is still a huge gulf between Herath and Prabhath, right? And, maybe in a few years' time, he might kind of get there. He's he's played very little cricket outside of Sri Lanka. He's played even less, not even less. He's played very little cricket outside Gaul. But he's gonna get better to figure out his game a little bit. I think Pires has probably put himself in line to be that kind of second spinner. I think Ramesh Mendes and I assume at some point Ebaldenia will come back into the frame, but I think that's a little while away, where he's going to have to do something extraordinary domestically to get back into the side. One final question for us before we wrap up. Chandana has asked, best bowling combination going into the South Africa test. This question worries me, and I'll tell you why. Because I had a long conversation, when would it have been? About 2 years ago. I'll tell you what, no, it wasn't. It was about 15 months ago. It was around the time of the Alex Carey stumping at the Ashes with Jared Kimber, and we were talking about climate change and how pitches in South Africa and Zimbabwe are actually changing the way they behave, and this is mainly due to climate change. And because of that, I wonder if some of the thinking, the kind of orthodox thinking of how to what the team configuration should be going into South Africa might need to change with it. That said, and considering the conversations we just had about what the bowling lineup should be,
Mm,
I think we're in a pretty strong position, right? Because I think we
yep.
kind of need to. I mean, I don't have the data on this. This is something I look into before the South Africa series. We will get a South African expert on to talk to us about how Sri Lanka can beat their team. And I'm sure more data will come out of this. But I wonder if actually just playing the one spinner and having three seamers might not
Mm,
necessarily be the best idea. But I need to find out because I don't know what the situation is with their wickets
yeah.
at the moment. I could be totally wrong. Who knows? Any thoughts on this, Dom?
Uh, I think apart from, I think it's going to depend on what we see, right? Because it depends where we're playing. I think they have announced the pitches. Let me just double check here,
It's Durban and
because
that word I
yeah,
can never say. Gerbica?
yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so Durban does take spin,
Yeah.
and so I feel like they'll definitely want to play a spinner there. I think it also depends who's injured and who's bowling well. I think that will determine it. But I think we have lots of choices. It'll depend also on South Africa's lineup, right? Is it left hand heavy? Is it right hand heavy at the time? So I think you have the luxury of going horses for courses here, and you've just had some young seamers bowl pretty well in South Africa too. So there's also that option to consider too. But I think you kind of have to start with Asata and Lahiro Kumara, like no matter what, those are your top two. Um, and then probably third most likely is Prabhath, but we'll see. And then I think they might, if they go four seamers, they might give someone like is it the Wijasundara a chance, given how successful he was in South Africa in this latest A tour.
Guys, should we end it there? We've been the Murali End. We will be back very soon with more content. More content? With content from the Women's World Cup. As I mentioned right at the beginning of the show, Estelle is there. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, hit that follow button, leave us comments. Come find us on WhatsApp. We're a growing community. Tell your friends and family about us. If you're into Sri Lankan cricket, then come on board. Come on in. You're more than welcome to come
Yep.
here. Leave your comments down below. We'll be back soon. See you all later. Thanks a lot. Bye.